This is a Fox News special report.
I'm John Scott in New York. This is Fox News coverage of a news conference between President Obama and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Again, the lead topic of their discussions has been what to do about Russia and its involvement in neighboring Ukraine. It is widely believed that the Russian government is heavily supporting Russian rebels who are tearing apart Ukraine. More than 5,000 people have died in that conflict. The two leaders have been discussing what to do about it. We expect to hear more of their decisions in just a matter of moments. Kevin Corke is at the White House for us and can perhaps give us some insight into what we might hear. Kevin?
John, good day to you from the White House. I want you to pay close attention to the comments that you hear in this particular remark at the White House as Angela Merkel and Barack Obama have a chance to address the assembled press. You're going to hear, I believe, two world leaders of one accord, which is to say, I believe that they will say today that they don't think it's a smart policy to unfettered arm the folks in Ukraine, despite the incursion by the Russians. And you've heard Press Secretary Josh Earnest say repeatedly here at the White House, there simply isn't enough that can be done to arm them properly, John.
Kevin, the two leaders are taking to the podiums. Let's listen to German Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Obama.
Welcome my close friend and partner, Chancellor Angela Merkel, back to the White House. Angela, of course, has been here many times, but this visit is a chance for me to congratulate her on two achievements. Well into her third term, Angela is now one of Germany's longest-serving chancellors. Perhaps more importantly, this is my first opportunity to publicly congratulate Angela and Germany on their fourth World Cup title. As we all saw in Rio, Angela is one of her team's biggest fans. Our U.S. team, however, gets better each World Cup, so watch out in 2018. Germany is one of our strongest allies, so whenever we meet, it's an opportunity to coordinate closely on a whole range of issues critical to our shared security and prosperity. As Angela and our German friends prepare to host the G7 this spring, it's also important for us to be able to coordinate on a set of shared goals. And at our working lunch this afternoon, we'll focus on what we can do to keep the economy growing and creating jobs. As strong supporters of the transatlantic trade and investment partnership, we agree that there needs to be meaningful progress this year toward an agreement that boosts our economies with strong protections for consumers and workers and the environment. I look forward to hearing Angela's assessment of how Europe and the IMF can work with the new Greek government to find a way that returns Greece to sustainable growth within the Eurozone, where growth is critical to both the United States and the global economy. And we'll be discussing our work to get all major economies to take ambitious action on climate change, including our initiative to limit public financing for coal-fired power plants overseas, and our global efforts to phase down some of the most dangerous greenhouse gases. Our discussion this morning focused on global security issues. We reaffirmed our commitment to training Afghan security forces and supporting a sovereign, secure, and united Afghanistan. We agree that the international community has to continue enforcing existing sanctions as part of our diplomatic effort to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, even as the P5+1 works closely together to do everything we can to try to achieve a good, verifiable deal. Two issues in particular that dominated our workday this morning, Russia's aggression against Ukraine and the international fight against ISIL. With regard to Russia and the separatists it supports in Ukraine, it's clear that they violated just about every commitment they made in the Minsk agreement. Instead of withdrawing from eastern Ukraine, Russian forces continue to operate there, training separatists and helping to coordinate attacks. Instead of withdrawing its arms, Russia has sent in more tanks and armored personnel carriers and heavy artillery. With Russian support, the separatists have seized more territory and shelled civilian areas, destroyed villages, and driven more Ukrainians from their homes. These are the facts. But Russian aggression has only reinforced the unity of the United States and Germany and our allies and partners around the world. And I want to thank Angela for her strong leadership and partnership as we've met this challenge. Chancellor Merkel and Vice President Biden met with Ukrainian President Poroshenko in Munich over the weekend, and Angela also shared with me the results of her talks in Moscow. We continue to encourage a diplomatic resolution to this issue, and as diplomatic efforts continue this week, we are in absolute agreement that the 21st century cannot stand idle, have us stand idle and simply allow the borders of Europe to be redrawn at the barrel of a gun. So today we've agreed to move forward with our strategy. Along with our NATO allies, we'll keep bolstering our presence in Central and Eastern Europe, part of our unwavering Article 5 obligation to our collective defense. We will continue to work with the IMF and other partners to provide Ukraine with critical financial support as it pursues economic and anti-corruption reforms. We discussed the issue of how best to assist Ukraine as it defends itself, and we agreed that sanctions on Russia need to remain fully in force until Russia complies fully with its obligations. Even as we continue to work for a diplomatic solution, we are making it clear again today that if Russia continues on its current course, which is ruining the Russian economy and hurting the Russian people, as well as having such a terrible effect on Ukraine, Russia's isolation will only worsen both politically and economically. With regard to ISIL, Germany and the United States remain united in our determination to destroy this barbaric organization. I thanked Angela for her strong support as a member of the international coalition that is working in Iraq. In a significant milestone in its foreign policy, Germany has taken the important step of equipping Kurdish forces in Iraq, and Germany is preparing to lead the training mission of local forces in Erbil. Germany is a close partner in combating the threat of foreign terrorist fighters, which was the focus of a special session of the UN Security Council that I chaired last fall. And under Angela's leadership, Germany is moving ahead with new legislation to prevent fighters from traveling to and from Syria and Iraq. At the same time, both Angela and I recognize that young people in both our countries, especially in Muslim communities, are being threatened and targeted for recruitment by terrorists like al-Qaeda and ISIL. And protecting our young people from this hateful ideology so that they're not vulnerable to such recruitment is first and foremost a task for local communities, families, neighbors, faith leaders who know their communities best. But we can help these communities, starting with the tone and the example that we set in our own countries. So I want to commend Angela for her leadership speaking out forcefully against xenophobia and prejudice and on behalf of pluralism and diversity. She's made it clear that all religious communities have a place in Germany, just as they do here in the United States. And we're grateful that our German friends will be joining us at our summit next week on countering violent extremism, because this is a challenge our countries have to meet together. And let me end on a historic note. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. It marks the 25th anniversary of the reunification of Germany. So in a time when conflicts around the world sometimes seem intractable, when progress sometimes seems beyond grasp, Germany's story gives us hope. We can end wars, countries can rebuild, adversaries can become allies, walls can come down, divisions can be healed. And Germany's story and the story of Angela's life remind us that when free people stand united, our interests and our values will ultimately prevail. And as we look to the future, as I prepare to visit Bavaria in June, I'm grateful for my partnership with Angela, as Americans are grateful for their partnership with the people of Germany. Chancellor Merkel.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, lieber Barack, ich freue mich.
Thank you, President. Dear Barack, I'm delighted to be back in Washington. 9 months ago, we were here for the last time, and this visit here has a lot to do with, first and foremost, the fact that we have assumed the presidency of the G7 presidency this year, and that we coordinate on these matters very closely, as we do on others, and obviously we will address issues related to the global economy when we meet in Bavaria on Schloss Elmau in the summer. From a European vantage point, I think we can say that we have made significant progress in a number of areas. We have countries who are now back on the growth path. Ireland comes to mind here in particular, but also Spain and Portugal. After a strong phase of structural reforms, they have now made significant progress. The new Commission that has come in office has launched a growth program in which Germany will participate. We will pin our hopes basically on growth and infrastructure, but also on other growth projects. For example, the digital economy. If I think of the state of the digital economy in the United States, there is a lot of things to be done by the Europeans now. I would say that a free trade agreement, the conclusion of a free trade agreement, for example, would also go a long way towards boosting growth. We know that you are very much engaged in the Asian Pacific area. There are a lot of free trade agreements there as well. And Germany will come out very forcefully in seeing that the negotiations between the EU and the United States on free trade agreements are pursued in a vigorous manner. It's in our own vested interest, in the interest of the United States, but also in the German interest. We are dealing basically on our G7 agenda with health issues. Let me just mention one. What sort of lessons have we drawn, for example, from the terrible Ebola epidemic? I think the one thing that we've learned is that the international organizations, the international community has to be quicker in reacting to such epidemics, and the G7 can give a very important contribution to doing this. And we're also interested, for example, in seeing Gavi be successful. We're delighted to be able to conclude the replenishment conference that has just been completed in Germany so successfully. Then we dealt with security issues this morning. It is true, Germany this year celebrates the 25th anniversary of its reunification. This would not have been possible, not have been achievable without our transatlantic partners, without the support of the United States of America, and we will always be grateful for this. And it is one case in point that it is well worth the effort to stand by one's values for decades, to pursue long-term goals and not relent in those efforts. After we thought in the 90s maybe that things would turn out somewhat more easily, somewhat less complicated, now we see ourselves confronted with a whole wealth of conflicts, and very complex ones as that. We worked together in Afghanistan. We talked about this as well. Germany has decided in its fight against IS to give help, to deliver training missions, to deliver also weapons if necessary. We work together on the Iran nuclear program, where we also enter into a crucial phase of negotiations. One particular priority was given to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia this morning. We stand up for the same principles of inviolability of territorial integrity. For somebody who comes from Europe, I can only say if we give up this principle of territorial integrity of countries, then we will not be able to maintain the peaceful order of Europe that we've been able to achieve. And this is not just any old point. It's an essential, a crucial point, and we have to stand by it. And Russia has violated the territorial integrity of Ukraine in two respects, in Crimea and also in Donetsk and Luhansk. So we are called upon now to come up with solutions, but not in the sense of a mediator, but we also stand up for the interests of the European peaceful order. And this is what the French president and I have been trying to do over the past few days. We're going to continue those efforts, and I'm very grateful that throughout the Ukraine crisis, we have been in very, very close contact with the United States of America and Europe on sanctions, on diplomatic initiatives, and this is going to be continued. And I think that's indeed one of the most important messages we can send to Russia and need to send to Russia. We continue to pursue a diplomatic solution, although we have suffered a lot of setbacks. These days we will see whether all sides are ready and willing to come to a negotiated settlement. I've always said I don't see a military solution to this conflict, but we have to put all our efforts in bringing about a diplomatic solution. So there's a whole host of issues that we need to discuss. Over lunch we will continue to talk about climate protection, about sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Goals. So, yet again, thank you very much for the very close cooperation, very close coordination, and the possibility to have an exchange of views on all of these crucial issues. I think not only in hindsight can we safely say that the United States have always stood by us, have helped us to regain our unity in peace and freedom, but we can also say we continue to cooperate closely if it is about solving the conflicts of the world today. Unfortunately, there are many of them, and we will continue to do so in the future. Thank you for your hospitality.
First question, Steve Muffson, Washington Post.
So as the question and answer session begins, not a great deal of new ground broken there by German Chancellor Angela Merkel and President Obama. They have been discussing, you heard the laundry list, everything from climate change to the fight against Ebola. But what we were wondering about was whether they would announce any new, tougher policy toward Russia over Russia's incursion into Ukraine. There are many crying out for the arming of the Ukrainian government, providing heavy weaponry to try to repulse the Russian invasion or Russian-supported invasion. We did not hear that really from either leader. They both talked about continuing sanctions against Russia and saying that Russia has violated international norms and will pay an economic price if it continues to do so, but no talk of providing arms or heavy weaponry to the Ukrainian government. Please stay tuned to Fox News Channel and this Fox station for continuing coverage of this story. I'm John Scott in New York.
This has been the Fox News Special Report.